Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome back to another weekly review of The Mandalorian. This is our review on Chapter 4, Sanctuary, of an 8-part series of The Mandalorian, Disney Plus's new Star Wars TV show. You all know it. You've always watched it illegally or however you're watching it. I'm Chris, joined today with George, and we're going to give our rundown, discussion, analysis, speculation on not just this episode, but where we think it's going to go, and see if we're accurate in a few weeks' time when this is all said and done. So how are you doing tonight, George?
I am very well. I'm amazed it's already halfway through the series. It's flying literally in the sense of episode 4, and watching episode 1 felt like yesterday. It's going so quick. It's because it's so easy to access it too. No, it's exciting, and I'm excited to see what comes next.
Definitely. So I was late to the party on this one. I've had quite a busy weekend. So usually I watch this every Friday night as soon as I get in from work. But had a lot of stuff going on this, so I literally just watched it like just over an hour ago. So you've watched this when it first came out. So you've been sat on your thing, and you kind of prepped me for this one. So I may have gone into this episode a bit more negatively than I usually would. But not to say that you hated the episode or anything like that. But you did mention that this felt like the most fillery episode. That was your initial first thought on it.
Yeah. I mean, we're going to talk spoilers. So about halfway through, I thought this feels very filler. It feels like a one and done as well, not like it's going to be a main story point. And to jump right to the end, the last minute or so, essentially, to me, the whole point of this episode was you want, basically, I don't know how to phrase this, but it's kind of, they're looking for peace. It's obviously the name Sanctuary, I guess. They're looking for peace. They're looking for Sanctuary. But ultimately, there's a bounty on Baby Yoda, and it's just something you're not going to be able to hide from. I only interpreted that with the final 2 minutes. I know there's obviously other stuff in the episode. There's obviously like a smaller story, etc., etc. But to me, that was ultimately the point of this episode, and in the hope that in the next one, he's surely going to have to go out and address that issue that he can't just keep hiding. He's going to have to go and get that bounty removed, aka kill them all.
Yeah. And I completely forgot about this until the credits hit, but this is Bryce Dallas Howard's directed this episode. Obviously, daughter of Ron Howard, directed after much turbulent production history on Solo. He finally got that movie out. I don't know if this is her directorial debut. I'm not sure if she's done anything else, because I know she was in Black Mirror, but I don't know if she directed one of those.
I think she's just directed a documentary, but I'm assuming this is her first maybe fictional piece. I don't actually know, but I didn't really think of this. The episode felt very familiar, and there's one obvious comparison which we'll get to, but I had some weird Jurassic World feeling, and I don't know if it's because it was Bryce Dallas Howard, but when you get towards the end of the ATST, it felt very dinosaur-y. I don't know if that is just maybe me reading into it too much in my head, but
no, I kind of get where you're coming from. I think it's like the environment, the nighttime setting, maybe the way it's kind of stomping with its feet, perhaps. Yeah, I guess I can kind of see that.
It's not an obvious comparison, but I don't know if it's mainly probably because her name's attached to it. I had that connection, but the print in the ground, the wood, and everything like that. I mean, it's not a criticism of it. I thought, for a directorial debut, it was fine. I'm intrigued to see what comes else, and obviously the beauty of having this as a TV series means they can try different people, give people chances rather than chuck them on a 200 million film. They can say, you know what, here's an episode of TV. Let's see how you can handle this. Ultimately, that is what directors have to. I know, obviously, Rian Johnson. We're not here to discuss episode 8, but he did his indie films. Then he did Breaking Bad, and it was really Breaking Bad that got him Looper, that got him Star Wars. So I think certainly over the last 10 years, I want to say more than ever, directors are really coming through TV first, then jump into film.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I went into this episode a bit negatively, but I actually didn't mind this episode. I do have some negatives, which we'll get into, mostly down to the fact that the story of this episode is very been there, done that. It feels like I've seen this story 1,000,001 times, and it isn't changed or isn't different. I think why this feels fillery, and this is kind of my biggest frustration at the moment, and again, it might not be a frustration when we get to the very end of this series and we can view it as a whole thing and we can see all the pieces being put into place for something that's going to come together by episode 7 or 8 of this, but The episodes so far have felt very sort of short little vignettes, like short little mini stories. And I think that method of storytelling for this, of what we know is an 8-part series, is frustrating to me, because I would like to see something with a consistently built narrative. It feels almost like chapters of a book, like tiny. Well, I mean, they are chapters. They are, they are called chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4. But it doesn't feel like it's building to a big whole. It feels like we're tuning in weekly for like a short little romp, a short little adventure with the Mandalorian and Baby Yoda, and that's fine. But it's kind of frustrating to me. I want to get into the nitty gritty of the story, and it felt like we're being fed tidbits of that. We had the stuff last week with the client and why they've captured Baby Yoda and what they're trying to get from him and things like that. So we've got bits like that, but episode 1 and 2 was, we're dicking around with Jawas and the Mandalorian's going on his mission. They're fine viewed as single entity episodes, but I'd like to see something, especially when we get into next week's and we're very, very close to the end of this series now. We're past the halfway point. Something more cohesive coming together towards a kind of final destination for this story, what it's trying to tell.
Yeah, and you said before we hit record as well, we've not been introduced to, I know you actually said his character name, but it will be Gus from Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
Formally, obviously, we know via trailers, photos, whatever, we know that he's in it. And I think I've said this 2 weeks in a row. I'm convinced it'll happen next week. Still hasn't. But this episode, it kind of hit me that I didn't, because I don't dislike the episode, but it felt very filler.
Yeah.
And that was, oh god, sorry, Jake's editor's made a reference to Star Wars Rebels. Sometimes you need your space whales. I think that was.
You have to explain that one to me.
Without doubt, it was the worst filler episode in the history of. Well, actually, no, it wasn't the worst of Rebels, but it was a really bad episode. But then it kind of came full circle because 3 seasons later they put them in the finale, which made no sense.
Oh, okay, so there was a payoff. Okay,
there was a payoff 3 years later. One thing about Dave Filoni, there is always a payoff, which is why This is the thing. This is why I've got a lot of faith for this series, because everything gets tied up in neat little buns. Even if it's a 7-year wait for the final series of Clone Wars, it's getting tied up at some point. March. So yeah, it was one of them where we're in this territory of the series where I think, because I'm so used to binging shows, getting everything at once, which I love doing that. I don't mind watching shows weekly. With Game of Thrones, we always knew the end game as well. We knew that. Spoilers for anyone that hasn't watched it, that's not going to waste their time. We knew that Daenerys would get to King's Landing. We knew that eventually these characters who have been in a million different storylines would come together into one, and there'd be some big confrontation at the end. That was ultimately the entire series. We knew we'd get that, but with Mandalorian, again, we don't know where we're getting, and I don't know if that makes it harder, but it kind of, when you're 4 episodes in, and you've had short episodes previously, it kind of ramps to that intensity. Now, part of me feels as if the rest of this series is going to be judging off the last 2-3 episodes. They have been shorter, which I think is working for each episode. But I'm wondering is every episode going to be 40 minutes, or is it going to differentiate each week, and we get longer ones when the plot's there?
I think what's going to be frustrating is as well, and to be honest, I can see Disney doing this. It makes a lot of financial sense, especially with Disney Plus. This is going to be one of their big flagship series for already when it's been released in the US, it's going to be one of their big flagship ones when it's officially released worldwide. We're going to get a season 2. I don't doubt that we're going to get a season 2. If it's either been confirmed or whatever, it's going to happen. And what's going to be frustrating with that, and I think Red Letter Media mentioned this in one of their latest reviews, that TV is almost like a film now. You become really invested in it, and they pitch all these questions, and you expect a sort of contained payoff by the end of that one season. But then by the end, there'll be threads that are setting up for another one, or they might not answer everything, and it's like, oh, come back next time. And then you kind of have to snap yourself back to reality and go, oh, actually, no, I am watching a TV show. This is what TV shows do. They're built to continue for as long as possible. And what's frustrating about that is I don't know how much mileage this story is going to have. That's what I'm worried about the Obi-Wan spin-off. I would like that to be a single contained 6-episode miniseries and leave it at that. But I know they probably won't if it's, I can't get my words out. If it's well received, they'll do a season 2. and you're just going to get those storylines that are just left open-ended. It's going to just keep going on and on and on. And that's going to be annoying to me.
I think Obi-Wan's one and done. I don't think Yona would have signed.
I hope so.
I mean, it was going to be originally one film. One film's become a series. I think it'll be left at that. There's honestly nothing they could tell furthermore. I'm pretty nut on Cassian's the one I'm worried about because ultimately no one's asked that film. And at least there's an end point because the moment it gets to Rogue One, it's game over. But no, I think Mandalorian, you're bang on it. It's their flagship one. They announced the season 2 like a couple of months ago that was being written. I think now that I don't know if they're filming. It's very weird. So when season 1 filmed, it was kind of formally announced halfway through filming all the episodes, and I reckon season 2 is the same because it's filming now. Jon Favreau said it's filming now. I think it started filming the week episode 1 premiered. Obviously, they've not revealed who's directing episodes. I'm assuming they'll do that when it's wraps, but I know that Jon Favreau said he'll direct one this time. But no, I see. I think with Mandalorian, obviously the story ultimately for this one is Mandalorian and Baby Yoda. I think, judging into a bit of speculation, that Yoda won't be with us by the end of the series. I think this episode, obviously, we get that moment in this episode where he says, I want to leave Yoda here where it's safe for him with everybody else. I think ultimately that'll be this finale of season 1. I think, assuming they don't kill him, which we'll discuss as well. I think that, it can't have. It's like Logan. The more I think about it, the more it starts to slowly remind me of Logan. Not sort of theme-wise, but saying this episode that, oh, here's your baby. You're this broken man who's, seen war. Here's all these peaceful people. Come and help them. You don't want to help them, but you can help them. Obviously, you said it to me. Seven Samurai, been done a million times. And this, to me, felt like an episode of Clone Wars. There's been so many episodes of Clone Wars like this. Yeah. And, that's where, to me, the filler came from. Not being filler, but the really recognizable filler. I mean, you look at, again, jumping to Breaking Bad. I know it's harsh to compare it to something like that, but you got The Fly, which people deem one of the best episodes in the history of TV. Certainly one of the best of Breaking Bad. That was a filler episode. It was I forgot the name of it. What they called it. So really tight budget episode.
Oh God, yeah, no, I know what you mean.
You know what I mean, don't you?
Yeah.
Fly was filler, but the most important point was the final moment where basically he says he's got cancer again. Spoiler for Breaking Bad. And filler can work, but that wasn't done the same way that it's been done a million times. And I mean, it might be rude of me saying this is filler. It's probably, to be fair, budget-wise, this was probably more expensive. There's an ATST, there's new sets, there's more extras, more characters, maybe. But I don't know. This episode, I don't dislike it, but it wasn't what I expected where I think the series was going to go. However, the one good thing about an episode like this means that I don't imagine we'd be visiting it back for an integral part of the story.
Yeah, I hope so. And that's the thing, like when you talk about the ending there with and which we'll get to more in depth, where obviously we learn that there are other bounty hunters, there are other people with these trackers still going after Baby Yoda, and that they've essentially got to keep moving. I think you could have still told that in a plot, in an episode that wasn't so fillery with like these, training farmers in the span of like an afternoon to fight against a huge military thing. As you said, like we've seen it loads in every single film ever. So I think you could have took that part of the episode, but still put it in a more relevant episode throughout and not just have like a relevant 5-10 minutes at the end. That being said, talking about like new characters and everything like that, we are introduced to what I hope is, I'm sure she's going to come back. And that's what I hope with the ending, when you talk about Filoni and paying stuff off. I do hope that when this all comes to a head and we get to that last episode, we do get all these characters returning either for one goal or under one thing, so it all doesn't feel like it's been worthless. But Gina Carano's character, Cara Dune, she's a former rebel shock trooper, sort of a mercenary character. I really enjoyed her character. Now, she doesn't get like a really involved backstory. She gets a couple of lines and that's it. I'm assuming that's going to be it, and we're just going to run with that now. I would like to know more of her history and everything like that, because I actually did really think she was a cool character. But I want a character more than just someone who's proficient, like military proficient and, close quarters combat and everything like that. I did really like her, though. I thought she was a really cool addition to this series, and I liked the camaraderie that she had with Mando. That fight they have as well, where they're kind of equally matched. I really enjoyed that stuff.
Yeah, I hope she's back because Gina Carano was at every single marketing point, premiere, celebration, trailers, merchandise. She's had all of it from the get-go. I didn't think we'd get a 4 episodes. I thought we'd have had it much earlier. And I would assume that she comes back. I'm not going to rescan all the trailers and stuff in case I see things that obviously I don't know, but I don't feel like she wouldn't return. I think Gina Carano, I don't want to say she's, that sounds right. She's used to be MMA fighter.
Yeah.
She's got a physique of something that we haven't really seen in Star Wars. Like, I know it's hard to watch, but she had like a rebel like tattoo there on her eye. Because obviously they indicate she was a rebel shock trooper, why she left them. There's still questions asked. There's a bounty on her for a reason we don't know why. I think we'll bring her back into it. I thought she had, albeit it's hard to build a character with sort of chemistry that's a bloke in an armored suit, but they seem to work well with each other for the episode, and I think she's quite frankly too interesting not to bring back as well.
She reminded me of have you seen Aliens, James Cameron movie?
I've not seen it for quite a long time.
There's a character in that called Vasquez who's this quite built woman character. Like, she reminded me a lot of that with the very same mannerisms I can see. But I hope she comes back, which she will do, but I hope we get more of a character and she doesn't just show up for like an ending action scene. I want to get more to the nitty-gritty of her character. And I thought she really played off Pedro Pascal as Mando really well. I really liked seeing their interplay there. I liked we've just got Klaatu in the comments as well. JX says as well about Gina Carano's character, if she doesn't get a book, she'll get a comic book series. Probably. That tends to be the way when you want to get to know characters more, which is a shame. We get a lot more of Mando in this one as well. We see more sides to his character. We see him trying to almost be like this fatherly character, this protective role to Baby Yoda, which we've seen amount as the episodes have gone on, which is a really nice slow progression with that. But also we get a bit more of the lore of the Mandalorians as well. We learn a bit more about his past. Like, obviously they took him in from a very young age, which we kind of gathered from previous episodes anyway. But the whole thing with the why they don't take the helmets off and the repercussions of what happens if they do take the helmet off, in that they're essentially not allowed to wear the helmet again, which I haven't seen it, but it looks like there's a Mandalorian character from Rebels, the chick with the purple hair, which will explain why. Or I know, because she does put the helmet back on in some scenes, doesn't she?
This is the plot. I don't know if it's a plot hole. I don't know what it is, but for the entirety of Clone Wars arcs, everyone's got their helmets off, and they tend to put them on when they go and fight. It's a very weird one. It's a very weird one because
they kind of fucked that up. Then
this is my thing, and the thing is, obviously, Filoni co-created Clone Wars as well, and Mandalorians have been like his baby. He took them in Rebels as well. They've got their helmets off. I don't know if it's meant to be his clan per se. So I know that they are split into clans, and obviously the ones we saw last week had no signs of taking them off. But I'm hoping for some more clarification on that.
The thing is, though, if they take the helmets off, unless you do it in front of everyone there, who's going to know? Like, we see that in this episode. He takes his helmet off to what I assume to eat and drink, which makes sense. Because if they can't take those helmets off, how do they do it? Do they have to, like, get a straw underneath the helmet? Is there, like, a little shutter that opens up on the visor for the mouthpiece? It's dumb. I mentioned this last week when they said that they can't take the helmets off. It's dumb. It's not practical.
Because they asked him when to take off. He said, "Oh, yesterday." They're like, "Oh, to another human being." He's like, "Not since I was a child." So it's because of what I've seen in Rebels and then Clone Wars. It's a very weird line that I think needs clarification, because if not, it's an almighty plot hole.
Yeah, from the same creator as well. I mean, well, we have seen that. Like, even J.K. Rowling with the. I don't want to turn this into a review for the Fantastic Beasts movie, but she's put stuff in that movie that contradicts her own lore. Maybe sometimes people just forget, but I know that they tend to be pretty on it with Star Wars canon, although I know even with George Lucas, there's some discrepancies between the original trilogy and the prequel trilogy and stuff that you kind of have to fill in the blanks yourself or come to your own conclusions. I mean, if they have missed that, that's a huge fuck up.
This is the thing with Lucas. I think it always just like it's George Lucas, his product. He does what he wants. No questions asked, but no one says no to me and to Norman Osborn. Disney seems to have been a lot stricter with canon. There's less, not content. I know that the expanded universe has always been a very, not necessarily with me and you, but a more hardcore that have probably spent 20 years reading books get offended by him deleting it. I mean, I've always said this: if I was going to spend $4 billion on owning the rights to, I wouldn't have a book from 30 years ago written by a fan say you can't do this, which I agree with. And as George Lucas always said, he didn't mind the EU, but it was never. It was like he said it was canon, but it wasn't canon that he had to follow by. He could basically say goodbye, doesn't care about it. So there's that difference. And since they took over, they bought the rights and listen, we're resetting the entire canon. Clone Wars will stay. The films will obviously stay, and everything now on will go forward, which has been pretty, from the stuff I've seen or what I've looked into, seemed pretty nailed on. They tend not to delve into the eras where there's stuff planned. So obviously, naturally, with Episode 9 coming out next month, they haven't done a million books set between 6 and 7 yet. We're starting to get a little bit more. Obviously, Mandalorian, I guess, counts as one. And obviously, I don't know if I said this to you last week or on one of the episodes, but with Mandalore, you've got obviously Rebels explores it, Clone Wars explores it, obviously the Mandalorians explored it, and we know that the big part of the final season of Clone Wars is going to be the Siege of Mandalore, which is going to be like not a click, but I think it's going to explain a lot. Not that you have to watch any of that to appreciate this or the others, but in terms of the canon they've built up over these 7 years now, does that make any sense?
Yeah.
And this thing. Totally. For something like that, I think there needs to be an explanation, because it's too big for them not to have not thought about as well.
The concept of the whole thing just like completely boggles my mind, though, because Mandalore's a planet, right? This isn't just like this isn't like a sort of 300 Spartan warrior nation, like a small group of people from this province are these magnificent warriors. Everyone on that the whole planet is meant to be one of these Mandalorians, right? Am I right in saying that?
300's a good. I mean, they don't truck the baby Mandalorians off cliffs.
If it was like, say, like the strongest, like protectors of Mandalore or something like that, this elite squadron, technologically advanced and everything like that, then fair enough. But if every single man, woman, and child on that whole planet is meant to be like this, wearing helmets that they don't take off, they're
not all meant to wear helmets. That's why I want them to clarify it, because there are clans within Mandalore, and they'll do things differently. That's well known. But this is my issue with this: is essentially with Mandalore, the planet, the Mandalorians are just naturally the best the best soldiers, the best technological advancements, the best this, that, the other. They've always been a threat to the Empire. They've been a threat to the Clone Wars, because they stayed neutral rather than take sides. And obviously entered Darth Maul and some stories which will get tied up next year, which I'm looking forward to. It's a very weird one, because there's so much. I would need to rewatch Clone Wars and Rebels, but there's so much scattered lore, I want to say, that if you delved into it, you could probably find it. But I think off the top of my head, it's a case of not natural selection, but naturally you would end up. I'm trying to think. There's been like a sci-fi film like it where, Man of Steel. You know how on Man, what's his planet called? I don't really know. Well. So remember that weird thing where Michael Shannon's like, your blood is like you're these kind of people. It seems a bit like
the different houses kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like Clan Vizsla, it's more like clans as such. This is why it's a weird one, because they're clearly a clan, because they're going to be underground, no one can see them. This is the way I feel, as if that's their clan, unless something has happened post. Because obviously this is obviously a bit of Rebels, there's a bit of backstory, but it's a very weird one, because there's that clarification. But I don't know it fully enough, but I think that they're a clan from Mandalore that obviously got out after whatever the Empire did to them.
Because to me, it works better. I don't mind the concept of never take your helmet off, say in battle, as a method of surrender or something like that. To me, it works better as either on the battlefield, a kind of honor in battle duty kind of thing like that, symbol of power, a symbol of their heritage or whatever it happens to be. Never let your opponent take your helmet off, something like that. I get that. It works if it's a secret society, like they mentioned that they've been underground for so long. If it's sort of like an assassins or, you know, guild or something, or thieves guild or something like that, protect your identity. You can see, like, we don't want faces. We don't want people tracking you or knowing who we are or tracing you back here. So under no circumstances let anyone see you without your helmet off. You can still take it off, like if you've got to eat, if you've got to do things, but just make sure that whenever you're in public or whatever you're doing, going about your business, you keep this helmet on. It works for that. If it's just like a matter of life, full stop, you have to wear this. That's where I have a problem with it. So I think they need to explain that a little bit more, because the concept's a little bit shaky for me. But maybe I need to do some digging, as you said. Maybe the lore is out there. Maybe it's all there. Maybe there are still some blanks that need to be filled in.
I think this is where the 8 episodes will help, because I think we'll have a clearer image. But we know, well, I'm assuming that those of that clan will return at some point, or he will go to them. We know he doesn't need any more new armor, but for story purposes, I don't think they'd have introduced them all to have disappeared after one fight. But I think that's something that hopefully gets cleared up, because that's also potentially very confusing for a lot of people as well.
Yeah, so, I mean, even for like you who have like watched Clone Wars and watched Rebels and stuff like that, see, like, if people that have followed it that much, even the new canon, and we're starting to see, like, you know, threads there that are unraveling a little bit. The last thing I'll say on it as well, like where they say they can't take the helmets off, like, I'm like, well, if you're in like buttfuck nowhere, like a random planet, like who's going to know if you've taken your helmet off or not? But then when we got to the end, and this will be a good segue onto the ending, I thought, have they got some kind of like police? I thought that guy with a rifle behind him was, because she was about to take his helmet off, wasn't she? Like as a kind of acceptance into this new clan. And I thought this guy was sort of checking up on him from the Mandalorian. Like, is he taking his helmet off? If he does, like, he's shot. Like there's a sort of execution if they take their helmet off. Obviously, that isn't the case, and it was like a lone assassin out to kill Baby Yoda. This is easily one of Baby Yoda's best episodes. His features in this episode quite a lot. Thing is adorable, and we were talking about this before. I've mentioned this in every single episode that we've done of this so far. As soon as those hit the shelves, it's going to be like Turbo Man from Jingle All the Way. You're going to have people queuing up for this thing. You're going to have like midnight releases for this thing, and I'm probably going to be one of them. And it's so manipulative by Disney. I do give them a free pass on this, though. You can tell that, you know, they've got this thing in there. They're appealing to the kids, like the really young demographic and everything like that. We've seen that through Star Wars before, whether it's Jar Jar Binks in, you know, the prequel trilogy, whatever happens to be, the Porgs in the sequel trilogy, BB-8 as well. It's something to appeal to the younger demographic. They've got the baby cooing noises. They've got everything like that. Every single scene. He's got the biggest eyes. He's like the cutest thing ever. And it is quite manipulative. The reason I give it a free pass is because there is a lot of story potential there. There is still some things there's questions that need to be answered. And it's intriguing. Like, one of the biggest things that we've been talking about sort of on the group chat in between is we've been trying to work out when he would have been born, his origins, what it could tie him with. Is he related? We do have questions around it. And that's why I'm more accepting with this one, because of the potential of where it could go.
Yeah, and I mean, not that it's cute, but story-wise, I think. Sorry, I've said it to you before. If it had been like the Porgs, I mean, BB-8 had story-wise, so I don't mind that was like a new technology as such, more so than the cuteness, but it had both. You know, Porgs were on sale in September. The film came out in December. It was Porgomania. That's what they were calling it for many months.
For the record, I don't even mind the Porgs, but you can sort of see
they were
the Matrix. You know what I mean?
Going into episode 8. I was worried potentially how much Porg there could be because of what had been in the build-up for 3 months. And episode 8 was fine. There was a couple of shots here and there, more so for comedy than anything. Chewbacca barbecued one, which was amazing. But it wasn't, you know, as in the face as I thought it could be. Whereas Baby Yoda, there wasn't merch on Force Friday. It wasn't in any. They made the point of CGIing it out of every trailer, out of every photo, out of any bit of press in the build-up. Klaatu just commented, "Is it a he?" They said it was in this episode, which confirms that. I did think it was very feminine. Not that I'm sitting here comparing men and women.
Female.
Well, the only two in history are Yoda and Yaddle, to compare it to. But I think Baby Yoda is one where when it does go on sale, when that time comes, I know they've released in America like concept art T-shirts and I think someone asked Hasbro at a convention recently, like, do they have any plans? And they said nothing will come out this year it's all going to come next year. So I'm just fully expecting some social media posts, and they'll be like Black Series, Vintage Series, remote control, cheap remote control, the expensive remote control side. I don't know if you saw it, but when that Sith Trooper got unveiled at San Diego Comic-Con, every single form of merchandise had it come out at San Diego Comic-Con, and that's what's going to be Baby Yoda. Cow's put there is already merch and it sucks. That's the awful concept art t-shirts and phone cases on Disney.com America. I think the proper ones, as I said to you before, if anyone knows what a Furby is, all we need is a Furby, or like, something nice, good quality. If they really want to go all out, they can provide the cot with it as well. But Baby Yoda has become a cultural icon, and no one knew of its existence until 3 weeks ago. That's what makes it even more incredible.
The memes are there. Like I've always said, like it's a kind of turbulent time between Star Wars fans. There's been it feels like there's been Disney's driven a wedge between fans with the new trilogy, for better or worse. But Baby Yoda feels like an armistice. It feels like the guns and swords have been laid down, because we can both agree that we fully support the inclusion of Baby Yoda in Star Wars. I love him. He's cute. I want to see what happens with him.
I hope he doesn't, because we thought, me and you both had a moment where,
oh no,
when that bounty hunter had the Mandalorian scopes, it's when he moved to Yoda, and I was just sat there on the sofa like, no way.
Yeah,
and because it wasn't in any trailers, because it was in nothing, we don't know its fate. And in that same episode, he said, I want to leave it here, it will be safe here. That's the ultimate, red flag. It's gonna die. The next 4 episodes is just gonna be him on a rampage, murdering everyone. I think it had me, obviously, until they revealed it was Cara Dune shooting the bounty hunter. But it was a moment which I think you hear the sniper bullet, you get a shot of the birds, and there is a very quick shot of the children running around, but they specifically show it so you don't see Baby Yoda. Because an image of that on the floor would be probably the saddest moment in the history of TV.
It had me too. And I should have guessed they probably wouldn't have done it, but you're right. I think because they kept constantly saying oh, he belongs here, he looks so happy. And part of me thinks should they have done it? If there's going to be people in the comments now Chris, you're insane. No, it shouldn't have happened. And I know it shouldn't have happened, but it did have me. We've got that attachment. And that's really good. We're attached to a character. We want to see him protected. We want to see him safe. We cheered when Mando went in and rescued him from the evil scientist in episode 3. We cheered now when the evil assassin got... It was a headshot as well, man. Can you imagine? It would have been absolutely horrible.
I mean, people always talk about the saddest moments of their childhoods. E.T. going home, Bambi's mom, Colton Treebor. Not many. I struggle to think of anything that could have. I mean, even in Pokemon movie when they all turned to stone, that made me really upset when I was 3.
Yeah.
Qui-Gon Jinn dying was upset when I was 3.
Littlefoot's mom in Land Before Time, that got me.
This would have trumped all of them. There would have been no recovery.
You see, because I could have seen that, and I thought that was where it was going to go. If Baby Yoda dies, this is going to be the catalyst that makes him just snap, and he's going to be the action star for the next couple of episodes. But I couldn't stand to watch that. I'm glad it hasn't happened, but also part of me, there's always a part of me that really wishes that Disney would take more chances with stuff, especially of late. And if they were going to do anything like that, that was the chance they could have took. Can you imagine the people talking about it though afterwards? Had they have done that?
I think they'd be rioting. I think there'd be loads of angry Facebook mums complaining. Child have been traumatized for life. How do you put? Would that have been worse than the Red Wedding?
Yeah, kind of would have.
Red Wedding was spoilt for me. Wow, not spoilt, but I'd read I read what happened, so it wasn't really spoilt as such. But they're all humans. They're not cute baby Yodas. There was an unborn baby killed in the Red Wedding, but it wasn't sad because it was a victory for the Lannisters. I can't compare. I think I'm happy it survived. I see what you mean with taking risks. I think there may be moments in which that may happen later on in the series. But I would personally pray that Baby Yoda makes it to Endgame. I feel that killing him, it would be not risky. It would be the opposite of risky. Not devastating consequences, but just uncomfortable viewing, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Is that maybe a bit weird? Like,
yeah, no, I agree with that. And it probably, well, I was going to say it wouldn't be in the spirit of Star Wars, but children have been murdered by the Jedi Temple full in Star Wars before, so it wouldn't be the first time that it's done something like that. But yeah, maybe that would have been like a cheap low blow. Like I can see both sides of it, definitely. And also, if they had have got rid of him, I think that would have ruined the genuinely great sort of bond and build that we're seeing between Mando and this kid. I call him a kid. He's 50 years old, but he's still a kid in Yoda years. Until we learn that species name, I kind of hope we don't learn the species name, because there's a kind of niceness in the unknown origin of Yoda's species.
I'm convinced we won't. I thought they might at the start, but I'm convinced now that I reckon they'll name it, as in the Baby Yoda. They'll give him a character name. But I think there'll be a moment with the scientists where they'll go on about, we extracted something, we cloned something, whatever. I reckon they'll say of the species. I don't think they'll specifically name it.
Mm-hmm.
Because that would be midichlorians.
Yeah.
That's something that people don't need. I mean, ET species ever named? Like, sometimes people know, sometimes they'll give answers to questions no one's asking. Midichlorians with the perfect Star Wars example, that if people wanted to learn the origins of the Force, that'd been cool, but not it's bacteria. Like,
yeah.
There's so many ways you could do something like that. Yeah, I'd love to know more about Yoda's people or the species, but not in that sense of, here's the planet, here's the location, here's the name, here's their evolution history. Just more like, they're like this rare spiritual, like a Pokemon kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? One of them.
The details don't matter. Like Red Letter Media mentioned this, where like the original trilogy, it's a fairy tale. It's like a fair, like you could view the first one on its own. It told the story. They did a trilogy. It was fine. There was a magic. There was a mystery to everything. And then it kind of got into the Wikipedia territory, where it was like, this character was the ancestor of an ancient Sith who was converted to a Jedi in 22 BBY. And it's a lot of junk and detail and over-explaining things. And I think that's where midichlorians came from. It's fine. I've accepted it over the years, but I do think that it's a different argument for another time, but you get the kind of junk stuff like that. So I hope they don't mindlessly complicate the history of the Yoda species, everything like that. I do like your theory, though, that they are kind of like a legendary Pokemon. Maybe they only crop up every couple of thousand years. But then again, you have Yaddle as well, which kind of features into the mix. So maybe it is like an endangered species race. We don't know. Claudia says Disney will not kill the golden goose. Well, after this episode, I completely believe that, because they probably won't get to a point now where they will kill Baby Yoda. If they were going to do it, it would have been this episode. And this episode really made it clear that this show is for kids. I don't necessarily have a problem with that to a point, as long as it's not like dumbing everything down, as long as it's still appealing. Then I'm okay with that.
This episode more so than the others, but the others didn't feel like kids' TV. The Jawas a bit, but ultimately Star Wars has always been for kids. Like we're lucky we grew up with the prequels. I think that's one thing I will always say, that the best generations of seen Star Wars as a kid is the prequels, because that would have been very different viewing age 20. But I think that's one kind of thing that George Lucas has always said, was that, I made these for kids, nothing else. Clone Wars, all the same. Jar Jar Binks, all that jazz.
Even Ewoks, like you go back to Return of the Jedi. I know that specifically because of that is quite a divide. There's an age gap divide always with Return of the Jedi, I think, depending on when you saw that.
I don't think that's a criticism, but this episode was the most, I mean, to be fair, imagine being one of the little kid actors and you got to touch a Baby Yoda toy for like work, and then you're told you can't say a single word for like a year. Like, fair play to them, because how on earth children didn't tell everyone there's a Yoda we got to play with on film set. That would have been remarkable if that leaked online. I don't think anyone would have believed it, though.
I would say the kids weren't as annoying in this episode as they are in like Phantom Menace, like Anakin's friends with the pod racing.
Yeah, I was
kids
worried
from Attack of the Clones, the younglings, shit like that.
I was worried that like 12 of them are going to come forward as a group, but it seemed that the one girl that was the daughter, and she didn't really have much to say. And I think we all felt her tears when she hugged Yoda goodbye.
Children should be seen and not heard, essentially, especially when it comes to Star Wars.
Yeah, like I think it was a fair way of doing it. I don't think it was as kiddish as it made out, but certainly this episode was the less adult of the four. I want to say. I think the Jawas were quite kiddish, but they also got disintegrated many times, so that could be disturbing for the odd 3-year-old.
I think the last thing we really need to talk about this episode is, I mean, we've mentioned it briefly as well, but it's worth mentioning the ATST. You mentioned at the beginning the sort of race of aliens that we see attacking this village and sacking this village. You said there were a lot of Lord of the Rings comparisons. I don't know if you meant in terms of the makeup looked like Uruk-hai, or if you meant just that one scene, as you mentioned, from Two Towers, where that village gets pillaged and plundered.
I wouldn't say they looked like them, but they acted like them, and it was more the pillaging. Like, it felt a bit like the Uruk-hai, and then it kind of capped off when he was raising his weird stick thing in the air and making weird noises. Not there's like a direct comparison, but it felt like it. It's not like a criticism. It was very, here's an episode, straight away there's bad men raiding them and stealing all their fish, and they fried a poor droid, and there's a giant gun shooting, which we all know is an ATST. The one thing I want to say about the ATST, when it got to the point of them tracking its steps in the wood, I was really worried they were going to be like, oh, what's this giant footstep in the ground? We wonder what it is. 10 minutes later, reveal ATST. I like the fact straight away they both said it's an ATST. Like, if they'd have spent 10 minutes to dig something up, which everyone knew what it would have been off that footprint if they didn't know from the opening scene, that would have been a real waste of time. But I like the fact that both characters knew what it was from the get-go.
I know it's like sort of like modern filmmaking. They're going to be CGI now. Like, I understand that. I do kind of miss the janky stop motion animation kind of thing from them in Return of the Jedi, where they were models. This is noticeably CGI. Probably not just because it's on a TV budget, but I could imagine it would probably look like this in one of the new feature films as well. It was weird with the red lenses. It felt like they'd only done that because they wanted to make it look more menacing, and it was kind of like red eyes pursuing them, sort of like evil robot kind of chasing them. We've never seen one piloted at night. I know that we've seen those kind of like pre-ATST things in Revenge of the Sith, where they're inspecting the dead bodies of the Wookiees. Obviously, they were the precursor to what would eventually become the ATSTs. I'm sure they have a name. I don't know what they're called. But it felt, I don't know. I don't really like it, especially if this is meant to be like the remnants of the Empire, the last remaining tech that's been found and converted and patched up and things like that. Maybe the original ATSTs did have red lenses at nighttime. We've never really seen them at nighttime, so it's a possibility, but felt a bit overblown for one ATST. I will say as well, was the main sort of alien guy who raided the village at the start, was he meant to be the one piloting the ATST? Because they kind of bigged him up like a big boss bad guy, like a fistful of dollars or whatever you call it, or Magnificent Seven, where you've got this one guy that they've got to go after. And then he kind of wasn't in the rest of it. So was he sort of the main guy in piloting this thing that we didn't see? It felt weird that they the camera focused on him at the beginning and then we never got back to him.
I know someone got stabbed, but I assume that was a normal person. Well, a normal raider, but it could have been so if I don't really think about that. But it was a weird thing they made out like Uruk-hai, that you had alerts, like you knew he was the leader from the moment he was literally born to the point in which he died. Yeah, it just kind of, he was in that first scene and then they were just kind of merged into one. Maybe I don't know. Maybe it was that, but I assume it's dead.
I thought it was a new race as well because they looked very, very different. But I've just it's one of the skiff guards from Jabba's palace. I guess
I want to say Klaatu.
Klaatunians, yeah. I don't know if that's a reference to the day the Earth stood still with Klaatu, Barata Nektu, or whatever it is. What they were all called that actually, weren't they? So it probably is. The three skiff guards were Klaatu, Barata, and Nektu, which I think is a phrase from the original sci-fi Day That the Earth Stood Still.
I know that the one from Return of the Jedi was played by Billy D. Williams' son.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Yeah.
Who always crops up at a convention somewhere, and it's the same photo they always use, even though he actually looks a spitting image of his dad. But no, yeah, the Klaatu is weird. It's nice to see some of the species. Like it was like when they had boss species in that weird episode 2 when they fight. They didn't. You just knew it was the same species. It didn't need to be a carbon copy of Bosk, but you knew it was the same species. I don't mind it when it's done like this. Whereas if you had, obviously Baby Yoda is a bit different because the species are the same essentially. But when there could be 100 different things, I like it when they do that rather than have even the same with like the Twi'leks. Not every single one looks like Bib Fortuna. Yeah. They've all got the giant tentacles on their head, but they can differ in appearances.
That's fair. I don't know if there's anything else. I think we've mentioned everything. We get like another sort of bar cantina scene, but it felt different. It felt cool. I like that he's flipping coins to get information. That was kind of cool. Yeah, no, I didn't hate the episode. I can totally see what you mean by filler. I think there could have been more economic with the storytelling, but it's a nice sort of self-contained episode, which is a good thing and a bad thing. It's good that you can just sort of pop this on beginning to end. You don't really have to have watched the previous ones to appreciate this episode. But I am getting to the stage now where it's like, okay, we're halfway into this thing now. You've done your setup. You've set up your characters. Can we please kind of narrow in, get to an end point? Where is this plot heading to? Who's the big bad? What's this story trying to say that you're telling over 8 hours? I kind of want it to just focus in a little bit, which hopefully we'll get next week. As you say, hopefully if we get introduced to Gus's character and he is the big villain, then I think that's when it's going to start coming together a little bit more.
Yeah, we need that now. Like I said, we've had the filler. As you keep saying, in 4 weeks' time, we might look back at this differently. If this becomes the episode before it all goes crazy, I'm fine from that. But I am hoping that. Well, I'm not hoping. I think it really needs to get into gear now because again, we don't know where they're heading now. They just said they're going somewhere else. I hope they're heading back to the clients to do something or whatever. But I don't want it to be a goose chase, a bounty hunter chasing them for an episode.
Yeah, which I'm worried is what's going to happen next time, but we'll find out. I guess let us know what you thought of this episode. Claudia already has. She's put, I hated this episode, miles away from the first two. I can understand people not liking this episode. I thought it was perfectly fine. It was perfectly serviceable. Anyone else who watches this JXC, any other people, please do comment. Let us know what you thought of this. Let us know your speculations for the rest of the series, where you think it's heading, and what your thoughts are on The Mandalorian so far now that we're halfway through. We will be back next weekend, I hope. I know that you're pretty busy next week, but whether it's a solo one, we'll try and figure it out. We might have to move around some days, but we will be back at some point next week with episode 5 review. It's weird because it's not like Game of Thrones. They don't announce the titles for these episodes, do we? So no. It's just going to be unnamed chapter 5. But yeah, so that will do it for this week's. Thanks to everyone who's tuned in, commented all the way through. You guys are awesome. And until the next time, we'll see you guys in the next video. See ya.